Vacant sites can only be true comparables to the subject site if they have similar highest and best uses. If they don't, the sales properties are not comparable.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome, everyone. Dustin Harris hanging out in the podcast chair. Sponsored today, of course, by Alamode Software. Alamode, been in business for over 30 years. I've been using them for over 20 to help me to be more efficient at what I do. Check them out. Go to alamode.com or pick up the phone and call them at 800-ALAMODE. Datamaster, of course, also helping me to be more efficient, allowing me to not have to rekey what's on my screen, folks. And one button, save you 30 to 60 minutes per report. It's datamasterusa.com. One more time, datamasterusa.com. And finally, we are sponsored by Working RE magazine. Working RE, of course, is the place that I go to get information about what's going on in the appraisal world. It's very entertaining. It's very informative. Check them out. Go to workingre.com. One more time, it's workingre.com. Well, folks, we've had a series over the last several months. It's been quite popular. As I look at the downloads, these are questions that appraisers are having across the nation, and grateful to have somebody on much smarter than myself, Mr. Timothy Andersen. Welcome back to the program.
Dustin, thank you. I appreciate it very much.
I appreciate it.
As always, and my best to your family.
Well, thank you. My best to yours as well. I appreciate you being on the program and to take on a couple of questions. It has been our process, listeners, over the last couple of months to do a series what we call Dear USPAP Instructor. I am not a USPAP instructor. Mr. Timothy Andersen is, in addition to being an MAI and a very smart individual and a good friend of mine. So I defer to him when it comes to questions that come in regarding USPAP items, information, knowledge. When it comes to questions that have to do with USPAP, I defer to you, Mr. Tim. I appreciate you being on today.
Oh, Dustin, of course. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So let's dive right in. We've got two questions today. One of them has to do with consultation. We're going to dive right into that. I'm just going to read the question and then let's chat about it. Sound good?
Okay, great. Go ahead.
All right. Here's the question. Dustin, a friend recently asked me if putting in a new kitchen in a rental property she owns would add a lot of value to the house. She and her husband bought the house 15 years ago as an investment and rented it out. Now they want to sell it and pay the cost of her attending law school. I told them that renovating the house would be worth the effort. So they spent about $35,000 on replacing an entire kitchen, new paint, new carpet, and so forth. They have not gotten any offers on their listing price, and if they lowered the price much more, will not get back their $35,000. Did I do anything wrong that could get me in trouble with the state? By the way, this is an anonymous question for obvious reasons. Tim, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I agree with Shakespeare. First, kill all the attorneys. Right. Dustin, okay. Your correspondent says, did I do anything wrong that is going to get me in trouble with the state? Okay, I'm going to try to say this as positively and as optimistically as possible. Probably. Okay. Here's the issue. But first of all, certified residential real estate appraisers, certified general real estate appraisers, are not qualified to opine as to the quality of an investment. That takes a Series 7 license.
Okay.
And unless you've got a Series 7 license, then there's some misrepresentation going on. Next is the $35,000. Now, obviously, it's not so much the money, the $35,000. It's the implication that your correspondent provided that if Mr. and Mrs. Investor spent the $35K, they would get that plus more back. That, of course, implies that the appraiser knew what the house was worth before the investment of the $35K. And in the question itself, there is no indication that your correspondent knew what it was worth.
No, it almost sounds like it's just a friendly conversation between neighbors.
Yeah, it does. And that's basically where I'm going. Then there is the issue of the $35,000 itself. Was it $35,000 because it was Loving Hands at Home that did it, or was it $35,000 because that's what a contractor charged? Obviously, if a contractor did it, chances are it's going to be better quality work than if somebody who didn't have a clue what they were doing did it. Then there is the implication that your correspondent also knew that once they had spent the $35,000, the property would be worth more than the extra $35,000 they spent. And again, from the context of the question, that there is nothing in the context of the question to lead me to believe that the appraiser had done the necessary analyses to determine that was true, indifferent, or false.
Right.
Now, you raised the issue of just a friendly conversation between neighbors. Okay, I'm not going to debate that. But, and there's always a but, isn't there?
All right.
But chances are these neighbors were having a friendly conversation, not because they were neighbors, but because your correspondent was an appraiser. Therefore, it would be very simple for the neighbor to interpret the appraiser's answers as having been done under the color of the authority of an appraiser. That's the issue. Now, if it was clear that they were just chatting, then there's probably not going to be a problem because there's no context to the answer. But because the neighbor felt he or she was talking with an appraiser who would know about things like this, then it's going to be really difficult for the appraiser to claim that this was just a neighborly chat between friends.
Right. Right.
Now, if nobody files a complaint, nothing's going to happen, quite frankly.
Okay.
But that's not the issue. The issue is, did the appraiser do something that was unethical? Yes.
Okay.
The appraiser should have made it very clear that she could not answer the question without doing the analyses first. For example, you're at a party and you find out somebody's a doctor, and you go up to the doctor and you say, "Doc, it hurts when I do this." Well, the doctor's going to say two things to you. First of all, don't do that. And then the doctor,
especially at a party.
Yeah. Then the doctor's going to say, "Why don't you come into my office next week and I'll take a look at it where I can function as a doctor, diagnose, and then treat you." That's how our correspondent should have handled the issue. But there is most likely some unethical actions going on in the fact that the investor, the Mr. and Mrs. owner, have the opportunity to say, well, the appraiser misrepresented this to me because had I known I couldn't sell my house for an extra $35,000, I wouldn't have put $35,000 into it. Yeah. So, yeah, there are some problems here, Dustin, and the problems that we as appraisers should avoid, and your correspondent should have avoided.
Yeah, well, let's hope that at this point, since this came in several weeks ago, that home is sold, and it's sold for over $35,000 more than what they thought it was worth before, and there's no problem. But neighbors can be neighborly conversations can turn real nasty when it comes to money. But Tim, I think that every one of us have been in a similar situation. Maybe not exactly like I'm reading on the screen right now, but I know that I have been in situations where friends, neighbors, family members have said, hey, I'm thinking about, X, filling in the blank. I'm thinking about putting a new deck on my house. What do you think that's going to do to my value? Man, it feels awkward when that question comes.
Ooh, it's really awkward because, again, they're not talking to you as a neighbor. They're not talking to you as a deck building contractor. They're talking to you as an appraiser.
Exactly.
And I think you and I both know, Dustin, that a deck is an extremely individual item.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, it costs $25,000 to put it in, but what happens if the next buyer doesn't like it?
Right.
The buyer is not going to reimburse you for that money.
Right.
Therefore, it is by definition a functional obsolescence. And we know by definition that something that is functionally obsolete has a value less than its cost to complete less depreciation.
What about an answer like this, Tim? What about saying something to the effect of, kind of explaining to your neighbor, hey, as an appraiser, I'm kind of under these strict, regulations and rules, and I can't really answer your question directly. I could get myself in trouble by doing that. But I can tell you, generally, the market usually doesn't support, value doesn't support a cost to build when it comes to things like decks or fireplaces or what have you. What about an answer like that where you're speaking generally and not specifically to the property? Does that give you any more coverage?
Making a general statement like that, Dustin, assuming you have support for it, is probably acceptable. Again, assuming you have support for it. Mm. Therefore, a general answer like that is probably acceptable. However, to say, you can build all the decks you want to, and it might add 25% in value of its cost, that applies a certain specificity that unless you shouldn't talk about.
Okay. Yeah. Good answer. We're talking, of course, with Mr. Timothy Andersen, MAI, USPAP instructor. Today we're talking Dear USPAP instructor. These are questions that have come in from listeners across the country. If you have questions about USPAP related items, send them to me, thecoach@theappraisercoach.com, and we will answer them, of course, quickly to you directly, but then generally to the audience. And you can, as we mentioned this morning, you can remain anonymous if you so choose to do so. I want to pause here and, of course, remind you we are sponsored by three great companies that have been with me from the very beginning. One of them being Working RE Magazine. Folks, I tell you, probably 2-3 times a week, I get something in my inbox from Working RE. And I know some of you are going to think, well, Dustin, I get spammed all the time. I don't want to get those types of emails. Well, guess what? To me, Working RE is not spam. Every single time I get a Working RE email, I click on it, I look at it. If it's something I'm interested in, I'll go further. I'll read the story. If not, I hit delete, I move on. Folks, you will learn all kinds of things about what's going on in the appraisal profession if you sign up for their free email, and it does not feel like spam. They make sure that they send you only important information. Check them out. Go to workingre.com. Again, it's workingre.com. We are sponsored by DataMaster today. I had a phone call 2 weeks ago from Mr. Rick Liffrith, the CEO, the founder of DataMaster, and he and I had a pleasant chat on the phone as I was driving down the road. And I'll tell you, this is a guy who really does care about the future of appraisal, who really does care about the intersection between appraisers and technology. I won't share with you all the details of the conversation that we had, but I walked away from that conversation feeling like here's a guy who really does care about where we're headed as an appraisal profession. Folks, you need to be linked with a company like this. DatamasterUSA.com is where you go to find out more. Whether you use their original or the new DataMaster 6 that is rolling out across the country, it will allow you to be more efficient. It will allow you to use technology to be able to make you more efficient as an appraiser. Check them out. Go to DatamasterUSA.com. One more time, it's DatamasterUSA.com. And finally, we are sponsored by Alamode Software. I continue to use Alamode. Why? Well, folks, it continues to give me benefits. For example, I go out into the field. I can take my pictures, including comp pictures. I can sketch, room placement, details about the subject property, details about the comps. I upload that to the cloud, and my staff on the other side downloads it and gets it ready for me to work on. I'll tell you, folks, that saves me every single time at least 30 minutes per report. That is huge, folks. Add that up. The cost savings and the investment is well worth what you'll get out of Alamode. Check them out. Go to alamode.com, or you can pick up the phone and call them. They have a friendly staff that will answer any question that you might have regarding their software. Just pick up the phone and call 800-ALAMODE. One more time, it's 800-ALAMODE or alamode.com. All right, folks, we are back. We're talking today with Mr. Timothy Andersen, who is answering questions that have come in from listeners regarding USPAP-related items. And you can send those to the coach at theappraisercoach.com, or you can reach out to Tim directly at tim@theappraisersadvocate.com. It's tim@theappraisersadvocate.com. We should pause here, Tim, and talk just briefly about one of the things that you do is help appraisers who might find themselves before a state board or an investigation. Why would someone want to come to someone like yourself if they get that nasty letter in the mail from the state?
Dustin, when that nasty letter from the state arrives, a lot of times it will ask the appraiser to admit or deny certain things. And appraisers somehow believe that if they write the 50-page answer, they're better off than writing a one-page answer. And that's typically not true. So when I consult with them, I say, be brief, be concise, be precise, be truthful, but don't answer the question the state doesn't answer. It's not your job to make the state's case for them. It's their job, so therefore let them do it. And then I also counsel them that if the complaint goes into the full charge stage, then in addition to someone who can consult with them on USPAP, they're going to also need an administrative law attorney to help them navigate this maze, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, most people are not familiar with that term, an administrative law attorney. Can you help them to find somebody that would be helpful in that case?
Sure. The easiest thing to do is to call the local bar association and ask for a list of administrative law attorneys. Okay. They'll happily provide you with one. And then you're looking for one who has worked with or for the real estate appraisal board.
Gotcha.
You're not looking for an administrative law attorney who does divorces or represents doctors in front of their board, stuff like that. You're looking for someone who understands real estate, who understands real estate appraisal. Chances are even the attorney is not going to understand USPAP. I'm a USPAP instructor, and sometimes I don't understand USPAP.
Right.
So it takes a team. And as part of that team, I help appraisers. Sometimes I can help them all the way out and nothing ever happens. Sometimes the best help I can give them is to say, okay, you messed up on that one. Take your shot and move on.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes that's all you can do.
Yeah. One way or the other, you want to have somebody in your corner that can help you to navigate that scary minefield of a state investigation. So, folks, when you get that letter, if you get that letter, heaven forbid, pick up the phone and call Tim. Your number again, 561-635. 5265.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, or just email him. You're very, very prompt on your email, tim@theappraisersadvocate.com. Okay, speaking of USPAP and speaking of a topic that you and I talk quite a bit about, because I think that it's probably underrated when it comes to appraisers. I know it has been throughout my career. It's only been the last several years that I've understood, I think, the concept a little bit better. But I'm still quite confused, and that's where the question comes from. We're going to keep this one anonymous as well. And the question says, Tim, the entire concept of highest and best use confuses me. When it comes to the typical Fannie Mae residential real estate appraisal, I check the box, but just what else am I supposed to be doing? Is an analysis of highest and best use in an appraisal really all that important? How do I stay out of trouble with my state board? And then, of course, the infamous help with an exclamation point at the end of this question. It's a great question, and kudos for the individual for asking it, not even asking to remain anonymous. I'm keeping them anonymous on purpose, but kudos and hats off to someone who's willing to, I think, voice what many appraisers feel.
Dustin, is highest and best use confusing? Yes, highest and best use is confusing, mostly because, well, for example, if you read the 14th edition of the Appraisal of Real Estate, there is an entire chapter devoted to the concept of highest and best use. If you read the 4th edition of Appraising Residential Properties, which is also an Appraisal Institute publication, there is an entire chapter on highest and best use. If you read USPAP, Standard Rule 1-3 talks about highest and best use, but it just assumes you already know what it is.
Yeah.
And then when you turn to the Fannie Mae selling guide and you look under highest and best use, you get a completely different set of directions on it. So, yeah, it's difficult, even though the concept of highest and best use is central to the formation of a credible value opinion. And if you go back to your 15-hour USPAP book and you look at the appraisal process, you'll see that forming a highest and best use conclusion is about the third step in the process. And since there are 6 of them, that's right in the central part of it. Now, one of the reasons that we go through a highest and best use analysis is because of the definition of a comparable sale. The 14th edition of the Appraisal of Real Estate, the 4th edition of Appraising Residential Real Estate, both say, and this is a quote, vacant sites can only be true comparables to the subject site if they have similar highest and best uses. If they don't, the sales properties are not comparable. And then later on page 316 in the 14th edition, it says, the highest and best use of the subject and a potential comparable must be the same or similar for both the site as though vacant property and the property is improved. Otherwise, the comparable should be eliminated from further consideration. So one of the reasons we go through highest and best use analysis is to be able to choose the comps. Now, in proposed construction, another use of the highest and best use analysis is to determine the financial feasibility of the proposed improvements. Now, this is an oversimplification, Justin, but please go with me on it. If in dealing with proposed construction, the cost approach, including a proper entrepreneurial incentive or profit, comes in higher than the sales comparison approach, then the cost approach does not set the upper limit of value. Instead, it shows that the proposed improvements are not financially feasible. Thus are not the highest and best use of the site as vacant and available to be put to its highest and best use. On the other hand, if the cost approach, again, including a proper entrepreneurial incentive or profit, comes in lower than the sales comparison approach, then assuming all the math is correct, then the sales comparison approach sets the upper limit of value and the proposed improvements are financially feasible. Thus, the highest and best use of the site as vacant and available. Now, keeping that in mind, we've got to consider what Fannie Mae says. Now, I don't expect anybody to write this down, but the location in the Fannie Mae Selling Guide is section B4-1.3-04. And you can get into the Fannie Mae document and then using the find function, type in cite a section of the appraisal report, and that'll take you right to it. And this is what it says. Again, this is a direct quote. The appraiser's highest and best use analysis of the subject property should consider the property as it is improved. Well, stopping the quote. What this tends to imply that you don't need to do the highest and best use as a vacant. But yet the next sentence says, this treatment recognizes, and this is a quote, this treatment recognizes that the existing improvements should continue in use until it's financially feasible to remove the dwelling and build a new one or to remove the existing dwelling, unquote. Now, that implies that even though Fannie says we're going to look at the property as improved, you, appraiser, have to look at the property both as improved and as vacant, because quite frankly, the highest and best use of the property might be to tear down the existing improvements to get at the vacant site. In other words, the vacant site is worth more alone than is the improved site. Then it says, again, quoting, if the use of comparable sales demonstrates that the improvements are reasonably typical and compatible with market demand for the neighborhood, and the present improvements contribute to the value of the subject property so that its value is greater than the estimated vacant site value, the appraiser should consider the existing use as reasonable and report it as the highest and best use of the property as approved. And that's the end of the quote. Now, what's interesting is Fannie Mae is saying here, let us tell you what the highest and best use of the site is. Don't you tell us. Let us tell you. So you've got the 14th edition saying something. You've got the 4th edition of Appraising Residential Real Estate saying something. You've got USPAP basically not saying anything, but just assuming you know what a highest and best use analysis is. And then you've got Fannie Mae saying, well, we really want you to look at the property as improved, but then you might also have to do that analysis as if it were vacant, so you can determine if the highest and best use of the improvements is to tear them down and start all over again. So which one do you follow? And Dustin, I don't know, quite frankly. Obviously, if the report's going to Fannie Mae, it better conform to Fannie Mae.
Right.
But yet, if that report, for whatever reason, goes to the state has every right and very possibly every reason to say, well, you followed Fannie Mae guidelines, but you needed a deeper analysis. You didn't provide it. Therefore, you misled your client and your intended users because you signed a certification that said you followed USPAP in developing and reporting your value opinion when in reality you didn't. So this gets back very confusing. Now, let me completely obfuscate this completely opaque.
as if we're not walking in a fog already.
As if we're not walking into a buzzsaw already. All right. If you go back over the last 60 years in the appraisal literature, you'll find some interesting articles on highest and best use. There are some appraisers out there, some of them with a whole lot of academic letters after their name, saying there is no such thing as highest and best use, because how can a property have one highest and best use? It could have numerous highest and best uses under the zoning. Then to say that the appraiser is capable of measuring out of the market every possible variable that could go into highest and best use, every possible variable that could go into any be located on the site, is kind of stupid. Because appraisers don't have that training, they don't have that time, and quite frankly, they're not getting that time.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt for just a second because I don't know if I'm completely following. When you say are you talking every hypothetical as if it has a gold mine underneath it? I mean, what are we talking about?
Well, for example, you've got a piece of commercially zoned property.
Okay.
All right. Is highest and best use a hotel or is it a gas station?
I see what you're saying.
Well.
Yeah.
The appraiser is supposed to be able to figure that out. But what if the buyer of this property wants to put a gas station on it and knows nothing about gas stations, whereas another buyer might put a hotel on it and knows everything about owning, running, managing, buying, selling hotels.
Yeah, so I've got my residential glasses on, and I forget I'm talking to an MAI. So highest and best use. You know, when you start to get into commercial, it's a completely different animal, really.
Well, even in residential, Dustin, okay, you're in a residentially zoned neighborhood. Okay, fine. Is the highest and best use a 3-2, a 4-3? Is it a Tudor or French Mediterranean? Is it ranch? Are you going to have a 2-car garage, a 3-car garage, a carport? Are you going to have a sauna in the master bathroom? All of these things go into a highest and best use analysis. But yet the appraiser typically doesn't have the time, nor the data, nor is getting the fee that is going to justify going into an analysis that deep. Yet the possibility clearly exists that your state appraisal board is going to look for an analysis that deep. And if the appraiser doesn't do it, then the state appraisal board has the decision to make. Well, are we going to come down on this appraiser with both feet in golf spikes? Or are we going to understand that there are some business limitations relative to what an appraiser can do, can't do, can afford to do, can't afford to do, et cetera, et cetera? I can't answer that question because I don't know. I've worked with a number of states over the years, and some of them would just as soon hang their appraisers as look at them. Others are much more amenable to the problems the boots on the ground appraiser has, and is willing to provide educational and retraining opportunities before providing punishment. But that's up to the individual state. And there are 55 jurisdictions in the United States and its territories and commonwealths and protectorates, etc., that interpret USPAP. So as a result, there is no centrality to the decisions state boards make, nor is there any requirement there be any centrality to those decisions. So we've got not only do we have 55 different organizations looking at USPAP and trying to determine it, we don't even have a consensus in the industry of what highest and best use means. I like to cite Dr. James Braskamp, who is considered by many to be the father of modern appraising. In his famous appraisal, the appraisal of 25 North Pinckney, which is a property in downtown Madison, Wisconsin, he did not address the concepts of highest and best use. He did not address the concept of market value. He addressed the concepts of most probable use and most probable value. So we don't have a consensus. The literature we read doesn't have a consensus. State boards don't have a consensus, but yet we're apparently held to a standard of developing a highest and best use conclusion that isn't there. And that makes it difficult on appraisers. Now I'm off my soapbox.
Wow. That was, honestly, and I don't mean this sarcastically at all, that was super interesting. I mean, I knew it was confusing, but to hear you articulate just how confusing it is and the dichotomy between different publications is quite revealing.
It's a challenge, Dustin, and I have I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here. I have a master's degree specifically in real estate appraisal. And I did a paper in graduate school on the concept of highest and best use, and is that nobody quite knows what it is.
Wow. Interesting. Mr. Tim Andersen, I appreciate your time today. You're always a wealth of knowledge. One more time, how can appraisers get a hold of you if they need their questions answered?
Dustin, my email address is tim@theappraisersadvocate.com. My phone number is 561-635-5265, or they can promise me a meatball hoagie, and I'll happily respond to them.
I love it. Tim Andersen, thank you. And listeners, thank you for sending in your questions. Again, you can reach out to either Tim with those questions, tim@theappraisersadvocate.com, or myself, the coach at theappraisercoach.com. Keep in mind, I will not answer those without help from Tim, but we usually answer the questions pretty quickly. Over email, but with your permission, we share those on the air so that others can learn from your experience as well. So we appreciate you joining us today, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.
All right, let me come here and I'm going to hit pause or mute on yours to dive into it. All right, here we go. Getting ready to start. Let me just hold on a second.